How many of you have ever heard of BTS? And about 7 hands went up in the air. What do you know about Korea? No one knew anything about. Okay, well listen, before you leave, every single one of you will know who BTS is because they're about to be the most popular performance group in the history of the world. All the virus in the city of Seoul had blown out of Seoul, but everyone had a mask on. Who's gonna be the first person to take their mask off? This is great. This is absurd. This is actually an example of educational insanity. The thing that Koreans don't really understand is that how Korea is seen in the rest of the world. You're really powerful. You are really powerful. So I am Professor Sam Richards. I teach sociology at Penn State University. I've been teaching a class, Race and Culture Society. This is BTS. So a lot of people around the world think they're cool. This is the future. It's probably very likely to happen. I am aware that my videos are popular in Korea. I'm very honored for that, I have to say first off. So I have a really interesting relationship with Korea. It starts back when I was in my early 20s. When I was studying for my master's degree, and there was a graduate student in the program who I was studying with, and he and his wife invited me over for dinner. And so we had dinner and we started talking about Korean culture and different things. And I had already read a little bit about Korea, but first off, I fell in love with Korean food. Then I really got interested in just the way they were as people and the things they were saying about Korea. I think I would say that it's the first country that really captured my imagination as a place of intrigue and fascination. It seems so different than any place I had ever known. So then about 5 years ago, I didn't know what I was going to talk about in class one day, and I woke up to a story on the radio about BTS. I said, this would be a really interesting thing to talk to my students about. So that's when I walked into class that day. How many of you have ever heard of BTS? And about 7 hands went up in the air. And I said, okay, what do you know about Korea? And basically, no one knew anything about Korea except Korean students and Chinese students. I've been thinking about Korea for 30 years, and I will tell you that before you leave Penn State University, every single one of you will know who BTS is because they're about to be the most popular performance group in the history of the world, and by far and away more popular than the Beatles.
And the Oscar goes to Jo Jung-yoon.
I will drink until next morning. Thank you.
Park Chan-wook. The decision to leave.
BTS!
Now, mind you, what's happening with my students, I will tell you, I am absolutely fascinated by the degree to which Americans and students around the world, the ways in which people follow Korea, but they do it as individuals. You have like a BTS army, right? But people are fascinated by Korea because they just found Korea. It's not because they're part of a group where everybody is interested in, Korean culture, or K-drama, or K-film, but it's because they discovered it somehow. And so what I see this in my class with these random individuals who are really fascinated by K-culture and K-entertainment, but they don't know that other people are. It's like they're appreciating Korea on their own smartphone or in their own bedroom, and they don't really have a sense that there's this whole world of people interested in Korea. I think the thing that many Koreans don't really understand, is soft power. Soft power. People talk about soft power. In fact, the problem with soft power is that it's stated so much that it loses its power. It becomes becomes softer the more you say soft power. But the fact is, the soft power of Korea is only growing every single day. And I think the thing that Koreans don't really understand is that how Korea is seen in the rest of the world. First off, there's almost nothing negative about Korea. There's not negativity, we don't think of ignorance, we don't think of uneducated people. People see Korea, they think smart people, advanced technology, really people who are able to get things done. Some of it is maybe overstated in the eyes of some folks, but when people think about Korea, they think about it in a positive way, and that's soft power. So you have various K-dramas or film, or you have, K-pop bands, and they suddenly become popular around the world. People have the idea Korea is a cool place. Korea is an important place. Korea is a place that matters because many interesting things are coming out of Korea. And it doesn't matter that those interesting things might be a performance group, or might be a television show, or might be a film. It doesn't matter. What matters is that people see some kind of quality production that is coming out of this nation, and it's cool, and they like it, and they think it's good, and so therefore Korea is a cool, good, and likable place. And therefore Korea has power, because that means that when Koreans talk, people will listen. Almost always have somebody from that country in my class, which is what leads me to talk about the country, because I want to bring some student down to the front and we have a conversation and so on. But people respond in different ways. Some people don't really care if I talk about their country. They don't feel proud, or they're not really happy, or countries that have a unique quality, people will be happy that I'm actually paying attention to their country. Koreans are always happy across the board because they're proud of what Korea has done over the past 30, 40, and 50 years. They haven't seen it, but they know from their history and talking to their parents and grandparents, people feel a sense of pride. Korea is a nation that has bounded upon the world stage in a very powerful and significant way. And I think for Koreans to hear that is really valuable for people in Korea. So I think it's the success of Korea that leads to an interest in how other people interpret that success. I get an email from Korea almost every single day. I also, from time to time, get emails from people who say, you're not looking at the dark side, you're not looking at the negative things, you're only saying positive things, talking about lots of different points, but it seems like when you talk about Korea, you only talk about the positive thing. When are you going to say some negative things? To which I often respond, you rarely hear me talk about negative things of any country. My job as a teacher in this class is to get people to open their eyes to places they don't know about. If I start by only talking about poverty, the problem is that's what people remember. My job is to get people to want to go to a country, to want to read more about the country, to want to know more about the culture, to really want to open up to it. And so I drop little pieces that are negative here and there, but I don't focus on that. One day I put together this kind of list of the ways of being of people in the West and people in the East. And these differences of just ways of thinking, ways of expressing oneself, just the ways in which, in Korea, you elevate the individual self and the community self at the same time. And a couple of them have gone viral. In particular, one Korean woman, I talked about her life compared to an American woman. She said, hey, how's your intellect? Are you smart? Are you whatever? She said, I'm kind of. Then she goes on to say that she has like a 3.8 GPA and she's graduating Penn State in 2 years, which is the whole class just exploded. She even told me later, she wrote and said she even got pushback here in Korea that maybe she shouldn't have even said that, even though I asked her, right? And I'm like, oh my God. Korea, you don't really put yourself out there too far or too forward, because that just becomes problematic in this kind of deeply ingrained communitarian way of being in Korea. In the West, especially in a place like the United States, expressions of self are how you are seen in very positive light. You elevate yourself. I want to be a leader. I want to own my own company. I want to do all these big, big things. And your parents would talk about it and everything would be great and you move it forward. It's a really complex thing then in the East to be an individual and to be a leader. Leadership only happens when you're willing to swim upstream. Leadership doesn't happen when you're with all the other fish swimming downstream. There are many different dimensions of leadership. One is being able to do that. You're trying to kind of move things with everybody, but also you've got to be able to step aside and swim in a different direction. And that's a very difficult thing to do in a place like Korea. So, my class at Penn State is really unique. If you watch my class and you notice, you will see that my students are not taking notes and they're not memorizing anything and they're not figuring out what they need to know for exams and quizzes. Because when I was a professor and I was teaching, I thought back to my undergraduate years and I thought, what do I remember from being a student? 5 years of undergraduate study, I remember one thing. All those notes that I took, all those exams I took, all of that for nothing. But then I thought, well, what'd you get out of it? And I thought, I got inspiration. I had some professors that inspired me. Pick up a book on my own time and read. They inspired me by showing me and telling me that they didn't have the answers to things, but they were just still a student and they were learning and they were just trying to figure it out and they were hoping that before they died, they would at least get an answer to a couple of life's deep, mysterious questions. And I thought, why don't I do that? Why don't I start teaching like that? And so I tell my students, put your books away, you're not bringing books in class. And I say, all I want you to do is when I say something that you say leads you to say, huh, never thought about that. I'd like to learn more about that. Or if I say something that makes you curious, Google it, find a web page, save it, and then go back to it later. If I can get them to actually want to take what I'm saying outside the classroom on their own time and do it, then I am a wild success as a professor. And that is how I came to teach in the way that I do. Most professors, most teachers have this idea that the way you teach is you open up people's brains, you pour information in, you let them sit with that, they spit it back on some kind of exam or a quiz or something, and then they move on with life. And then somehow they've been educated, but they have not been educated because the data show very clearly that people don't remember what it is. And I think here in Korea, it's called like brainwashing or something. You get done with an exam and you have to clear it out so you can start filling up your mind with things for the next exam. I mean, this is silly. What are you doing? This is absurd. This is actually an example of educational insanity. You're just responding to it. Why don't we see this? In my class, I really can't tell you who the smartest person in my class is because I have no way of knowing that. I don't have a score at the end. Oh, this person scored 97.8 on the exam and this other person 97.7. Oh, so the 0.8 is smarter, and I can't do that. That's crazy. Crazy making, yeah. I've never met a single person who has a negative view of Korea, aside from a Korean. Korean scholars, Korean American scholars or American scholars or European, French or Italian scholars who study Korea have lots of negative things to say. So I'm talking about the average people in the population. I'm just talking about average everyday people who really don't know very much. And I find that really fascinating. So don't forget, you're really powerful. You are really powerful.